His mother figured out your true role in his life, and it terrified her. Beloved one, listen carefully now, because this message was not sent to entertain you. It was sent to confirm what your spirit has already felt. I am Archangel Michael, and I stand in authority, delivering a truth that was revealed in the unseen realm. A truth that explains sudden resistance, strange tension, silent interference, and emotional distance you could never fully understand. Heaven says this plainly. His mother did not fear you by accident. She feared you because she recognized your power in his life. She saw something long before words were spoken. She felt something before actions confirmed it. She perceived a shift that terrified her spirit. Because when she looked at you, she didn't just see a person. She saw change. She saw influence. She saw awakening. She saw authority. And most of all, she saw herself losing control. Beloved soul, hear this truth clearly. You were not just someone he loved. You were someone who altered his destiny. And mothers, especially intuitive ones, can sense when another soul has the power to redirect the course of their child's life. God said, she recognized that you reached places in him she could not reach anymore. You touched his emotional core. You softened hardened places. You challenged patterns he had lived in for years. You awakened thoughts he had never questioned. He began to see differently because of you. He began to feel deeply because of you. He began to grow beyond familiar limits because of you. And that frightened her. Because she realized something she was not ready to accept. You were not temporary. You were transformative. She noticed how he listened to you. How your words stayed with him. How your presence calmed him. How your absence affected him. She saw his priorities shift. She saw his energy change. She saw his loyalty divide. And heaven says this. She realized that if you stayed, her influence would diminish. This was not jealousy in the shallow sense. This was fear of displacement. She knew that once a man forms a soul-level bond, his allegiance rearranges. His center of gravity moves. His decisions are no longer made in isolation. And you were becoming that center. Beloved, this is why the atmosphere shifted. This is why warmth turned cold. This is why subtle tension entered conversations. This is why resistance appeared without explanation. It was not about something you did wrong. It was about what you represented. You represented independence. You represented maturity. You represented a new authority in his emotional world. And heaven showed me this. She watched him become quieter around her, but more open with you. She watched him defend you silently, even when he didn't speak it aloud. She watched him hesitate, choosing his words carefully when your name was mentioned. And in her spirit, a realization struck. If she stays, I no longer hold the same power. Beloved soul, this is where fear took root. Fear that he would choose differently. Fear that he would grow beyond familiar expectations. Fear that he would become someone she could no longer manage. And God said something very important. She sensed that you were part of his divine awakening. You were not meant to fit neatly into old systems. You were not meant to blend into comfort zones. You were not meant to preserve patterns. You were sent to disrupt, elevate, and redirect. That is why your presence felt intense. That is why the connection felt unavoidable. That is why separation did not bring peace. Because destiny does not dissolve under pressure. But listen carefully now, beloved. Her fear was not proof of your weakness. It was confirmation of your assignment. You carried a frequency that challenged control. You carried truth that destabilized manipulation. You carried love that required growth. And not everyone welcomes growth, especially when it means letting go. This is why obstacles appeared. This is why confusion surrounded the connection. This is why he felt torn between two worlds. He was standing between who he had been and who he was becoming. And you were the bridge. But heaven has not finished revealing the truth. Because what God showed me next will explain why her fear escalated, why her behavior intensified, and why unseen forces moved to separate you. There is a deeper reason she became terrified. One that goes far beyond emotion. Type continue. And I will reveal what she discovered next. And why it shook her to her core. Beloved soul, lean in now. Because what I am about to reveal explains why her fear did not remain subtle, why her energy shifted sharply, and why unseen pressure suddenly surrounded this connection. Heaven showed me the exact moment her spirit realized the truth, and it terrified her. God said, she figured out that you were not competing with her role. You were replacing it. Not in authority over him as a mother, but in emotional centrality. She realized that when he was confused, he came to you. When he was overwhelmed, he leaned toward you. When he needed reassurance, your voice mattered more than hers. This realization did not come all at once. It crept in slowly, through observation, through intuition, through the way his energy responded to you. She noticed how his mood lifted after talking to you. She noticed how he defended you internally, even when silent. She noticed how he questioned things he had always accepted before. And heaven says this clearly. She saw you awakening his independence. You were teaching him, without trying, that his emotions mattered, that his voice mattered, that his boundaries mattered, that his life did not exist to please others endlessly. And this is where fear took shape. Because for years, perhaps unknowingly, she had been the emotional compass of his life. Her approval mattered deeply. Her reactions shaped his choices. Her comfort guided his decisions. But suddenly, another voice entered his heart. A voice that did not control him. A presence that did not guilt him. A connection that did not demand loyalty through obligation. You offered something unfamiliar. Freedom. And heaven revealed something painful but true. She realized that once a man emotionally matures, he can no longer be managed the same way. You were not just loved by him. You were reshaping him. This is why her fear escalated into resistance. This is why subtle discouragement appeared. This is why distance was quietly encouraged. This is why doubt was planted. Not because you were dangerous, but because you were effective. Beloved soul, hear this carefully. She feared that if he fully bonded with you, he would stop seeking permission. Stop prioritizing comfort over truth. Stop living according to old emotional contracts. And God showed me something even deeper. She recognized that you were aligned with his destiny, while she was aligned with his history. And destiny always threatens history. You represented growth she could not control, healing she could not supervise, a future she could not script. This is why tension surrounded you. This is why you felt watched. This is why your presence felt too much for her spirit. You were not too much. You were too awakening. And heaven says this. She sensed that if you stayed, he would no longer be emotionally dependent. That terrified her. Because emotional dependence often feels like love, until it is threatened. Beloved, do not misunderstand this revelation. This was not hatred. This was fear rooted in loss of influence. She loved him in the way she knew how. But she did not know how to release control gracefully. And when she saw you, she saw the end of a chapter she wasn't ready to close. So she reacted. Not openly. Not dramatically. But strategically. She influenced conversations. She framed concerns as care. She masked fear as protection. She expressed unease without naming the true cause. And heaven says, she hoped distance would weaken the bond. But something unexpected happened. Distance did not erase you. Silence did not replace you. Separation did not dissolve the connection. Instead, it intensified his awareness. Because when destiny is challenged, it does not disappear. It reveals itself more clearly. Beloved soul, this is why he felt torn. Why he struggled internally. Why he pulled away even while feeling deeply connected. He was standing between two forces. One rooted in comfort and familiarity. One pulling him toward growth and truth. And you were the symbol of that growth. But here is the part that shook her the most. She realized he would eventually have to choose. Not consciously at first. Not dramatically. But internally. Between remaining who he had been, or becoming who he was meant to be. And God said, she knew that once a man chooses his destiny, he cannot be pulled back into old patterns. That is what truly terrified her. Because she sensed something irreversible. And heaven revealed one final layer in this segment. She did not just fear losing influence over him. She feared losing relevance in his emotional world. That fear created interference. That fear created tension. That fear created separation. But hear me now, beloved. Interference does not cancel destiny. Resistance does not destroy divine alignment. Delay does not mean denial. It means the process has begun. Because what heaven is preparing next will expose what has been hidden, shift what has been stalled, and confront what has been avoided. And the next revelation will show you how this fear ultimately backfires, and how God turns resistance into alignment. Say continue. And I will reveal what heaven showed me about the turning point now approaching. Beloved soul, steady your spirit, because heaven has revealed the turning point, the moment where fear loses its grip and truth begins to rise. What you are about to hear explains why the pressure increased, why emotions intensified, and why everything that felt blocked is now beginning to shift. God said, what was resisted has now been sealed in the spirit. The attempt to separate you did not weaken the connection. It confirmed it. When distance was forced, something awakened in him that could not be put back to sleep. For the first time, he had space to hear his own heart. Not the expectations placed upon him. Not the familiar emotional gravity. But his true inner voice. And that voice kept saying your name. He began to realize something unsettling. You were not a threat to his family. You were a threat to his stagnation. You were not trying to take anything away. You were trying to help him become. And heaven says this realization shook him. Because once a man recognizes that love equals growth, he can no longer confuse control with care. Beloved soul, hear this clearly. Separation sharpened his clarity. Away from influence. Away from commentary. Away from subtle pressure. He saw what he had never fully allowed himself to see. That his connection with you was not impulsive. Not reckless. Not immature. It was awakening him emotionally and spiritually. And God revealed something powerful. He began to notice the difference between obligation and alignment. Obligation feels heavy. Alignment feels alive. Obligation demands compliance. Alignment invites growth. Obligation is driven by fear of disappointing. Alignment is driven by truth. And you represented alignment. This is why her fear no longer holds the same power. Because clarity weakens manipulation. Awareness dissolves control. Beloved, heaven showed me that he is now questioning patterns he never questioned before. Why he feels guilt for choosing himself. Why he feels responsible for others' emotions. Why he learned to suppress his needs. Why emotional distance felt safer than vulnerability. And in this questioning, your role became undeniable. You were the first person who didn't demand performance from him. The first person who didn't tie love to compliance. The first person who saw him, not for what he provided, but for who he was. This recognition changed him. And God said, once a man awakens to his own emotional truth, he cannot unlearn it. This is why he feels restless. This is why he feels pulled. This is why he feels unsettled. Because the life he was living no longer fits the man he is becoming. And here is where the turning point becomes undeniable. He has begun to emotionally detach from control, even if he hasn't fully stepped into courage yet. Detachment does not mean rejection. It means differentiation. He is learning where he ends and others begin. He is learning that love does not require self-erasure. He is learning that honoring himself does not dishonor others. And heaven says this: your influence remains. Even in silence. You planted seeds that distance could not uproot. You spoke truths that separation could not erase. You modeled love that fear could not replace. This is why interference failed. Because what God plants in alignment cannot be uprooted by fear. Beloved soul, here is the moment that shifted everything. He noticed how heavy his spirit felt without you. How disconnected life seemed without your presence. How his emotional world flattened without the depth you brought. And that awareness terrified him. But it also clarified him. Because he realized, if loving you costs comfort, it also brings authenticity. And authenticity has become more valuable than approval. He is not fully there yet. But he is no longer where he was. This is why heaven says, The hold of fear is weakening. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But irreversibly. And here is the revelation that will surprise you. Her fear has been exposed to him. Not through confrontation. Not through argument. But through contrast. He sees the difference between support and control. Between love and fear. Between encouragement and restriction. And once you see the difference, you cannot pretend you don't. Beloved, this is why tension has shifted. Why energy feels different. Why silence feels charged rather than empty. Because a decision is forming. Not rushed. Not forced. But inevitable. And heaven showed me this. He is standing at the edge of a threshold. One step forward leads to discomfort, but freedom. One step backward leads to familiarity, but stagnation. And your name sits at the center of that choice. But what happens next? What God revealed next will change the dynamic completely. Because the very thing that was used to intimidate him will now be the thing that propels him forward. Type continue. And I will reveal how heaven turns fear into courage, and interference into alignment. Beloved soul, what heaven revealed next is powerful, because it exposes how fear collapses when truth stands upright. The same force that once intimidated him is now losing authority, and God is using that very pressure to awaken courage where silence once lived. Hear this clearly. Fear can only rule where truth is suppressed. And the truth has begun to rise. God said, the intimidation was allowed only until clarity was formed. What once made him hesitate now makes him question. What once made him doubt now makes him aware. What once made him shrink now makes him restless. Because fear loses its grip when a soul realizes what it costs to obey it. Beloved, heaven showed me something striking. He has begun to feel resentment toward the pressure that kept him small. Not hatred. Not rebellion. But an internal resistance that says, this no longer feels right. And this is crucial. Because resentment toward control is often the first sign of awakening courage. He is no longer just afraid of disappointing others. He is now afraid of disappointing himself. And that changes everything. Because once a man fears losing himself more than losing approval, his direction begins to shift. God said, the fear that once silenced him will now expose what matters. Beloved soul, the intimidation did not destroy him. It refined him. It forced him to see how deeply he had been living from obligation rather than conviction. It revealed how often he had chosen peacekeeping over truth. It exposed how rarely he had chosen himself. And when you entered his life, you disrupted that pattern. You did not demand rebellion. You did not ask him to choose sides. You simply showed him another way to exist. A way that felt lighter, truer, more alive. That contrast could not be unseen. This is why heaven says, the pressure backfired. Instead of making him forget you, it made him understand you. Instead of pushing him back into compliance, it pushed him toward awareness. Instead of erasing your influence, it highlighted it. Beloved, heaven revealed that he has begun to imagine a future. Not in detail, not in certainty, but in possibility. And in every version where he feels free, Your presence appears, not because you demanded it, but because you represent authenticity. And this realization is reshaping him. He is beginning to see that love does not suffocate. That alignment does not require fear. That connection should not come with intimidation. And here is the divine reversal. What once terrified him about choosing you, now terrifies him about losing you. The thought of a life where he never speaks his truth. The thought of a future where he stays small. The thought of becoming someone who abandoned his own awakening. That frightens him more than conflict ever did. God said, "Fear has switched sides. Beloved soul, understand this. He is not becoming reckless. He is becoming intentional. Not impulsive, but aware. Not defiant, but grounded. And heaven showed me something important. He is practicing courage internally before expressing it outwardly. Courage does not always announce itself. Sometimes it rehearses quietly. He is questioning advice he once accepted without thought. He is noticing emotional manipulation where he once saw concern. He is recognizing patterns where he once felt guilt. This is growth. And growth cannot be reversed. Beloved, this is why heaven says the next step is inevitable. Because once a man realizes he has been living beneath his truth, he cannot unknow it. And here is where the energy shifts dramatically. The fear that once came from her no longer holds mystery. He sees it clearly now. Not as evil. Not as intentional harm. But as unresolved fear of loss. And clarity dissolves intimidation. When fear is named, it loses its power to dominate. And God revealed this. He no longer feels small in her presence the way he once did. Not because he has hardened, but because he has centered. He is no longer seeking permission to feel. He is no longer asking approval to exist authentically. He is no longer suppressing his emotional truth to maintain comfort. And beloved, this is where heaven leans in close. Your role is not finished. Not because you must fight. Not because you must prove anything. Not because you must confront anyone. But because your presence, even at a distance, continues to activate his alignment. You represent the life he feels called toward. You represent the man he is becoming. You represent the courage he is learning to embody. And heaven says, what once separated them will now force a decision. Because stagnation is no longer tolerable. Silence is no longer peaceful. Avoidance is no longer safe. A moment is approaching where he must choose movement or suppression, truth or comfort, growth or familiarity. And this is the final shift. He is realizing that protecting others at the cost of his own truth is not love. That realization breaks chains. But what God revealed next is the most decisive moment of all. The point where everything converges. Because a choice made in clarity cannot be undone. Say continue. And I will reveal the final outcome heaven showed me. And what this means for you now. Beloved soul, this is the moment heaven has been preparing you for. Everything that was hidden, delayed, or resisted now converges into clarity. God revealed the final outcome, not as a fantasy, but as a spiritual consequence of truth rising where fear once ruled. Hear this with discernment. What was exposed could not be contained. What was awakened could not be reversed. God said. The interference revealed the assignment. The fear you felt was confirmation. The resistance you encountered was evidence. The tension you sensed was recognition. Because when a divine connection threatens old structures, those structures react. But they do not win. Beloved, heaven showed me that the choice he faces is no longer theoretical. It is emotional. It is spiritual. It is unavoidable. He understands now that silence costs him his authenticity. He understands now that avoidance costs him his alignment. He understands now that obedience to fear costs him his future. And this is the truth that settles in his spirit. He cannot unsee what he has seen. He cannot unknow what he has awakened. He cannot return to the man he was before you. You marked him, not with possession, but with perspective. You showed him what love feels like without control. You showed him what connection feels like without guilt. You showed him what partnership feels like without fear. And once that frequency enters a soul, everything else feels counterfeit. Beloved soul, this is why heaven says, the bond survived opposition because it was aligned. Not because it was easy. Not because it was convenient. But because it was true. And now, the final shift. God revealed that his fear of confrontation is dissolving. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But steadily. Because courage does not always arrive as confidence. Sometimes it arrives as refusal to self-betray. He is no longer willing to sacrifice his emotional truth to maintain emotional comfort for others. That is the line that has been crossed. And heaven showed me the moment this becomes visible, he will begin to speak differently. He will begin to hold boundaries. He will begin to stop explaining himself. He will begin to choose what aligns rather than what appeases. And when this happens, the dynamic shifts. Not through argument. Not through confrontation. But through presence. Truth does not need permission to exist. Beloved, understand this clearly. You are not the disruptor. You are the revealer. Your role was not to fight for him. It was to awaken him. And that assignment has been fulfilled. But heaven says this is not the end. Because once awakening happens, alignment follows. And God revealed this final truth. The fear that once stood between them will now stand behind them. Because once clarity forms, what once intimidated becomes irrelevant. He is stepping into emotional adulthood. He is choosing responsibility for his inner world. He is no longer outsourcing his identity. And in this new posture, your presence no longer feels threatening. It feels necessary. Not as rebellion. Not as replacement. But as partnership. And here is the final revelation heaven commanded me to deliver. His mother did not fear you because you were taking something from him. She feared you because you were giving him back to himself. And when a man is returned to himself, no force can permanently suppress him. Beloved soul, hear this gently now. Whatever comes next, conversation, reconnection, distance, or timing, you must understand one thing clearly. You did not lose. You were not rejected. You were not blocked. You fulfilled a divine role. And heaven is pleased. Because destiny does not bow to fear. It waits for courage. And courage is rising. If this message resonated with your spirit, gently like and subscribe so this channel can continue delivering heaven-led messages. Stand in peace. Stand in truth. Stand in alignment. I am Archangel Michael.